I think I'd like to introduce, of course, the panel, and I'm very happy. First and foremost, because we have to recognize that we have artists represented here. All of our panelists are artists, and there are different art forms represented. And I hope that we can engage a slightly different conversation because of their art practice. I'd like to introduce, first of all, Leah Barber. Again, I point out that you have a very complete bio. I think it's significant that Leah is a choreographer and a dancer, has a distinguished career as both, and is clearly related deeply to the interdependence movement. I'm very pleased that Kathleen Kim is joining us here today. Kathleen has what I consider to be an exceedingly unique career. She is a professor of law at Loyola Law School here in Los Angeles. She is an expert in immigration law and human trafficking in particular. She is an accomplished musician and additionally a founding member of Human Resources, which is an art venue in Los Angeles dedicated to experimental performance. On this side, we have Tiffany Shlain, whose work you've already seen. And I'm very pleased that Tiffany is joining us today. She's a director of film and theater, internationally recognized. So we have film, theater, dance, and music. And joining us, Alejandro Pelayo-Rangel. Alejandro is currently the cultural attaché of the Mexican Consulate. However, I'd like to point out that Alejandro is himself an accomplished filmmaker, screenwriter, and producer. I'd also like to say, just to let Alejandro know, his daughter is matriculated at CalArts a couple of days ago, and that she's doing really well. Just want you to know that. I am Travis Preston. I am the artistic director of the CalArts Center for New Performance, and also, as you heard, the dean of the School of Theater. I am, as a practicing artist, I am a director principally on the stage. I think that there are a couple of things that I will use to frame the conversation and to slightly reorient and reframe from Jonathan. One of the things that I think is noteworthy about the interdependence movement, and this is quite singular. It is from the very beginning, as I understand it, it has had a focus on the importance of cultural discourse and the practice of artists moving across a variety of boundaries. I think this is extremely noteworthy, and I might add that I was particularly struck, Mr. Early, with your dichotomy of soft power, hard power, and within a discourse of power. And then similarly, how this dichotomy, we know how that works. But one of the things that's offered to us, usually made tangential, not central, as we have been made in the discourse of interdependence, is that in the arena of quote-unquote soft power, there are pathways of communication. There are pathways of interrelationship. And that the liberated imagination can create anarchic critique of existing social structures. Now, what I would like to do to begin is to ask each of our panelists to begin, because they come from such diverse places, such diverse practices, how their practice interrelates with interdependency, and what it particularly means to them from their perspective as artists. And I'll begin with Alejandro, just to take it from that end.
Okay. Thank you very much, Travis. It's a pleasure to be with you. Well, when I was trying to prepare my work for this panel, I was thinking in interdependence, and as a way to the art, in this case, films, can take in certain way something from your own culture and how to relate to the other cultures. And I was thinking in three moments, three special moments, when Mexican film it was an international and take from other cultures, and at the same time provide to other cultures. The first moment was during these awful years of the war between 40 and 45, when the Hollywood, the American film industry, was more oriented to bellicism and to making films about the war and kind of propagandistic films. And it was an open window at that time for Mexican film to start promoting our own culture to Latin America and to the United States, and was an interdependence within Hollywood and Mexico through the working on films. And in that time, Hollywood helped Mexico to become the most important industry in Spanish-speaking world. Better than the Spanish film industry, than the Argentinian film industry. And at the same time, Mexico City became a focus for interdependence with the Latin American artists. I can tell you that in the 40s, the best tangos were singing in Mexico by Libertad Lamarque in the films. Perez Prado invited mambo in Mexico, not in Cuba. And we have the most famous rumberas in the Mexican melodramas from cabarets. And the 40s was very important for that. It was the center of interdependence of cultures. And at the same time, Mexico was exporting these films with Libertad Lamarque. Of course, Jorge Negrete was the best singer of rancheras at all times. And for not only for Latin American countries and the markets, was also for all the cities in the south of the United States. In that time in Los Angeles, at least in the city, more than 80 cinemas were showing mainly Mexican films. All these cinemas, beautiful film cinemas on the Broadway Avenue were showing Mexican films. The other important moment was the moment of the Tres Amigos. Yes, it was right now when, a generation of new filmmakers decide to internationalize and interdependence with other countries in the world. And it's the time with Guillermo del Toro and González Iñárritu and Cuarón. One, was just a unique moment in 2007 when these three Mexican filmmakers, one with a film made in Spain, Laberinto del Fauno, Pan's Labyrinth, the other with a film, Children of Men, made in England, and González Iñárritu with a film made in Mexico, United States, Marruecos, Japan. They together had more than 16 nominations for the Oscars that year. And it's a way of this Mexican talent, Latino talent, was interdependent and interacting with the world. And I think in this moment, we have all this generation of filmmakers working in Mexico, working in Latin America, actors as Gael García Bernal, Selma Hayek with Fridas, and Kate del Castillo now doing a very famous tele show about narco traffic and all this war, terrible war of the Queen of the Pacific, and I cannot believe in a film without interdependence with other cultures and with other markets, and I think I am very positive in the terms of that we are now in a global completely environment, and it's not only the products, it's also art and artists, and I think in a positive way we are going to be more interdependence within us and within the arts. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to interact with you also. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. Let's stay on film. Tiffany, how about
I was
how
just
about your
enjoying so much
perspective?
hearing him speak. Keep talking. Well, a couple things. Film is, to me, the most interdependent art. I mean, I sculpt also, which just requires me and a bag of clay. And when I'm making a film, it's so interdependent creatively. And certainly with the technology today, my animators in Montreal, I have sound designers in other parts of the world, and that could never happen without the technology that's allowed it. And now I'm making films with people I have never met who send me videos, as you saw, from all over the world. So it's incredibly exciting time for me as an artist to think that I am making a film with hundreds of people that I will never meet and trying to bring it together. And that said, connected, I think that when you speak your universal truth, and in art, that can take so many different forms. You're speaking to a universal truth. That's always been kind of a guiding principle. And when I made Connected, which is this global history of interdependence and all stuff, but it also has a very personal story of me losing my father, and which was very scary to make that. But I felt like to get at the core of interdependence, I needed to explore my own interdependence in my family, which is a whole other panel. Interdependence in families. But the U.S. State Department has this program called the American Film Showcase. I don't know if you know about it, but they picked 29 documentaries from the last 10 years to travel around the world to represent America, and they chose Connected, which I was so honored. And so I just went to, thank you. But I say that because I went to Cape Town, South Africa, which I had never been to, and it kicked off the program. And I was reading a lot about Nelson Mandela, who's one of my heroes, and there's this great quote that, films are a wonderful tool for understanding. So here I am in Cape Town, South Africa, showing this film, which is about interdependence and about losing my father and connectedness. And, at the end of the screening, I have, hugs from people. I feel so connected to them. And I'm sure so many artists could say that when you're connecting, we're all human. We're all connected to our own family and this larger family, but art is such a, interdependence, being true to your own personal voice and speaking to some universal truth is such a powerful way for people to take down the barriers and understand that we're all human. We all want a better future for our children, and we want a better world tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Let me ask you one question to continue on that, because I certainly hear that. I'm kind of curious about what Jonathan brought up earlier and how you've experienced it.
Yeah,
I just specifically relating to an economy, an evolving environment for artists.
I know that, and Hollywood's so different than I think where I live in San Francisco for a number of reasons, but it used to be in the studio system where the studios own that relationship with the audience. Now, with Connected, I've got, almost 12,000 people on my Facebook page that have seen the film in some country. They connect with me daily with articles. Every time, when I have this new movie coming out, they're gonna push it out for me. And I haven't done this yet, but of course, crowdfunding. There's so many more channels, and in Hollywood especially, it's a small number of people controlling a small number of films that get made that are usually men. And today, there's 1 million more channels to create and get funded and get supported. So, with all due respect, I disagree.
Leah, can you
Yes.
give us your perspective? And I'd also love to hear you speak about dance practice in this context also.
Okay. First of all, I really have to say that being with Ben for 35 years,
Has it been tough?
It has been 35 years. It's been very tough at times. But, you know, I've been intimately involved in his progression from talking about democracy in the early days to forms of independence and nation states. And now, you know, 10 years or so ago, he arrived at this, you know, visionary idea, which is actually a very common idea. It's one of those ideas that's right there in front of your nose that we all understand and practice, of interdependence. So I am, you know, just by my state of being and my relationships and my family, I am an interdependent. And I've been growing into that role for a very, very long time, as you can imagine. As a dancer, it's interesting. I like that idea of soft and hard power. The fact is, about 5 years ago, as a performer, I reached my sell-by date. I just couldn't really do it anymore. And I decided at that point, I had a small modern dance company. I had been dancing. I signed my first contract when I was 11. And I really had spent so much of my life working with great artists and doing that if I wasn't going to perform anymore, I didn't want to teach anymore, I didn't want to run my dance company anymore, I didn't want to administrate anymore. And I kind of, you know, allowed myself to look at an open space in my life and really not know what I was going to do. This idea of soft and hard power, and the word that Sarah used, engagement. Sarah McEwen is so proud of the fact that her readers are people who are engaged in the world. And I was thinking about myself as an artist for a long time, and frankly feeling extremely frustrated because I felt in a certain way that I was not engaged in the world as an artist. I felt like whatever power I had was absolutely the soft power kind, not the hard power kind, and I was jealous. And I felt that lack in my life, and I will never be a hard power kind of person temperamentally, but I wanted to see if there was some way that I could engage and move in that direction. And I'll tell you honestly, it was film that brought me there. The combination of, you know, seeing many films and being ripe as an interdependent allowed me to view films like Tiffany's Connected, which is a very powerful film. I was telling her the other day, she also has a shorter film called The Declaration of Interdependence, which we talked about earlier today. I actually look at that every so often. But it amazes me that once I started, I've always been a kind of film fanatic, but once I started really thinking in this new way, I started finding a lot of films, a lot of visionary filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers who are out there not trying to sell me something, not trying to just make a lot of money the way Jonathan was talking about, but who were really asking me to be a witness to the world. And they were risking sometimes their lives. They take the risk of opening up worlds and creating films that inform us, that show us things that we don't already know about, that explore ideas. And little by little, one film after another, there was a film called The Big Spill several years ago that this young couple went to the Deepwater Horizon and, you know, engaged with people there and did a whole documentary about that. And in their film that was released 2 years ago, they showed us the tar balls and insisted that the oil slicks are below the surface that are now, just last week, actually washed up on the beaches as a result of Hurricane Isaac. They were insisting. They showed us that stuff in that film. But, you know, the world somehow wasn't paying attention. All the stuff coming from the White House and the government, and certainly from BP, was, oh, it's all clean, it's all clean. Well, this young couple knew it wasn't. And they were my eyes, in effect. I knew that it wasn't all clean because they risked to make a film about it, and I saw the film. So increasingly, I've been having those kinds of experiences. And about a year ago, Josh Fox, who is also an interdependent, and you may know his film Gasland about hydrofracturing, he did a short, 4-minute short at the request of Bill McKibben, who is also an interdependent and an interdependent organization. His group is called 350.org. And it's about it's engaged in all sorts of environmental actions. And Josh had made a film about the Alberta tar sands and the Keystone XL pipeline. I'm not going to go into all of that right now, but at the time I saw the film, I had never heard of these things. And 4 minutes after hitting the play button on my computer, I was outraged, sickened, depressed, energized, grateful that I had seen it, that I knew that this massive environmental atrocity was happening. And I was ripe, as a result of being an interdependent, to become active. And shortly after that, I joined a group at the White House. There were 12,000 of us, and we formed a ring around the White House. We literally held hands in one continuous circle around the White House on some of the exterior buildings. That is a long, long, big circle. And that was my first real engagement of putting my body, not on the stage as a dancer, but putting my body on the sidewalk, on the street, literally linking hands with other people who felt passionately the way I did about the destructiveness and the immorality of this project, and have since then continued to be very active. I go out and I carry my placards, and I was just in Albany last week, and I feel like very gradually I'm joining this large community that feels like a type of engagement that is just, it's mind-blowing to me, actually, where I am in that. And being an artist for all those years is certainly a factor. Being an interdependent, and those two things coming together have really fueled where I am today.
All right, thank you so much. I would like to hear from you, Kathleen. I confess that this panel was an opportunity for me, who have been intrigued with Kathleen's career, to be able to get to know her better. So forgive us for using this forum for that, but please.
Hopefully, my perspective, I think, will be one that's more unique, but I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be here. I want to thank the organizers of the Interdependence Day, as well as the other participants, and especially Travis Preston, who invited me to be here to continue this conversation that we started probably a couple of months ago about how social justice and the arts might intersect, and more specifically immigrants' rights, because that's what I've devoted my entire adult career to. So for most of my life, most of my adult life, I've led sort of a binary path. One of being a social justice advocate, and the other being this practicing experimental musician. And I've really struggled to define how they might intersect, and most of the time have kept them completely separate. And it's only in the recent past that I've had some opportunity to for the worlds to interconnect and for additional creative projects to come out of those connections. But I think that it's probably best to give some background of these binary paths at the outset to give you a sense of why I saw these two things as disconnected and how now they seem to be coming together. So first, sort of the social justice side, it was 15 years ago that I first came to the issue of human trafficking, and now it's all over the news and it's in the media, but back then it was relatively unknown. And this was right before I entered law school. I was teaching English to migrant farm workers in the agricultural fields of Blissfield, Michigan, which is in the western region of Michigan, which would see seasonal migrant laborers from Mexico every summer and fall. The conditions appeared horrendous, and sure enough, forced labor was occurring in those very migrant worker fields, of which the Department of Justice would investigate years later. So I went to law school to pursue civil rights on behalf of immigrant workers with a focus on the undocumented and guest workers who experience the most egregious employment abuses because of the control that unscrupulous employers could wield over their lack of immigration status or their precarious immigration status. There was an important law called the Trafficking Victims Protection Act that was passed in 2000. This was passed right before I graduated from law school, and it presented a significant opportunity to protect these very workers from deportation if they were to hold their employers accountable for workplace abuses in court. So I put together a legal services project implementing this Trafficking Act to access immigration relief for these trafficked workers so that I could represent them in civil litigation against their employers. And just by way of a data point, the trafficked workers in the United States, 90% of them are foreign nationals. In other words, 90% of them are indeed immigrant workers. Many of them are undocumented. I received funding from a foundation to launch this project at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights in San Francisco. I was the first attorney in the Bay Area to focus exclusively on this issue, providing services to trafficked individuals. So this is right after law school. It was an intimidating mountain of work to climb for a brand new attorney who hadn't even yet gotten her results from the bar exam. So I started doing outreach, giving Know Your Rights presentations in massage parlors, at day labor centers, at other immigrant worker centers. During one of these workshops at Las Mujeres Unidas y Activas, which is a domestic workers organization in the Bay Area, a young woman named Maria, she raised her hand and she told me in Spanish that what I was describing, the phenomenon of human trafficking, unfree labor, had happened to her. So I met with her privately, and she shared with me her story of coming to the United States. She was courted by a man, a US citizen, Luis, who was visiting Mexico, and Luis promised her that he would provide a life for her in the United States and that she could later bring her daughter to the United States if she agreed to come first to be with him. She did agree, and then after arrival, he took her passport away, confiscated it, and then forced her to work in restaurants and cleaning homes, and then taking all of her earnings. And he was able to maintain her compliance through some overt incidents of violence, but mostly through subtle threats of coercion, threats to deport her, threats to somehow harm her daughter in her home country if she tried to seek help. So Maria had the courage to self-liberate, and eventually she did leave the situation, and then with the help of Las Mujeres Unidas y Activas, she was able to gain social support and some amount of stability, but she did not have any immigration status, and there's Luis still at large, and of course she had very little money as he had kept all of her earnings. So she came to me for help, and I did take on her case. And part of obtaining her immigration status was to report what had happened to her to federal authorities, to the Department of Justice. And so I facilitated that interaction, represented her during those interviews with the FBI and the Assistant U.S. Attorney's Office, and they believed her story, and they immediately started investigating it, and it became the very first case that the Northern District of California, the AUSA's office there, had prosecuted under the Trafficking Act. So by the first 6 months of this project, I literally had dozens of clients. The word was out. I'd thankfully passed the bar exam, and so I could take on all these clients and start representing them. These clients were referred from other non-governmental organizations, sometimes from Good Samaritans, and also now from law enforcement that was now becoming familiar with the issue and wanting to implement this law. Now, there was no infrastructure in place in the Bay Area at the time that I started this work, and so it was very stressful work. I guess that's sort of the understated way to put it. But through this work and taking on these cases, we did build up an infrastructure, because it's not just one attorney that can provide access to protection and relief for traffic survivors. It involves enormous team of individuals, and perhaps this is my first lesson in interdependence and collaborative work, which is absolutely necessary to the success of any of these cases, because there's a lawyer that's needed not only for immigration relief, but also for the civil litigation, getting monetary damages for these traffic clients. Then there are attorneys that are pursuing the criminal prosecution, and then there are social workers that assist in the mental health and medical needs of clients, as well as shelter advisors, housing advisors, case managers, just so many people involved in one trafficking case. Now there is an infrastructure in the Bay Area. There's a great infrastructure in Los Angeles and in many cities across the nation. And all of these successes are a result of interdependence. Nothing can be accomplished without collaboration. So this is an important lesson for me, I think, in interdependence. I think one of the ways that I see it is responsibility. I think that an awareness that we're one piece of a whole means that we have tremendous responsibility. And for me, that underlying that is a social justice mission. So we have a responsibility to others and to the environment, to our community, basically to that we're living for other people and other things, and that we always have to advance and not do things to take steps back. All right, so that part aside, so I'm also an experimental practicing musician. In college, I went to Hampshire College and played with Yusuf Lateef, and then in law school, I continued my improvisational music practice, played with Jim Nadell, and so post law school, I continued to play music, and for much of this time, playing music was a necessary creative outlet. The social justice work I was engaged in was very daunting, and it was such a wonderful escape to have a creative outlet to continue to play music with. So in the past few years, I started an organization with a few other individuals. We have a collective called Human Resources, and we all come from different backgrounds, and everyone has some sort of art practice. And we're located in Chinatown. We focus on performance, so we are a performance art venue. We're also a 501c3, and our mission is to seek to broaden engagement with contemporary and conceptual art with an emphasis on performative and underexposed modes of expression. So we've had a very active programmatic calendar focusing on performance art and also installations that interact with performance. A couple of examples of now how I've seen these worlds interconnect, because as I said earlier, I sort of led these separate paths for quite a while. So one example, so Chinatown you've probably heard about this, but Chinatown has been threatened with the entry of a Walmart since last spring, and so Walmart received approval to open its doors in Chinatown, and it created a lot of controversy in the community, and of course labor rights groups got involved. So now we're a stakeholder in Chinatown. Human Resources has been located in Chinatown for 2.5 years, and the community came to us to become involved in this, and not only as a stakeholder in the community, but also as an arts organization to engage artists in the fight along with labor rights groups and immigrants' rights groups to challenge Walmart coming into Chinatown. So we did become involved, and we became a part of this coalition, hosted a benefit show that attracted hundreds and hundreds of people all over the media. It was the rally right before the major march of thousands of marchers the next day through Chinatown. It's the biggest labor rights march in Los Angeles of the recent past. So that is one way in which, and of course, my group performed there because we all believed that we should be part of this fight to challenge Walmart's entrance into Chinatown. So that's one way that it intersected. Another way is that with one of my collaborators, Kelly Coates, who's a visual artist and experimental musician, we started a curatorial project called Art for the Americas, AFTA. And it's a play on NAFTA. It's a critique of NAFTA, which is taking off the N. And our hope is to host foreign artists and to facilitate a visa process. And since my expertise is also in the immigration area, I'm hoping to utilize resources from that end to facilitate the visa process for foreign artists who can exhibit their work through our AFTA project. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'd like to just kind of respond to a few things, and I want to start with Alejandro, because I agree with you that the three amigos are I know Alfonso Cuarón fairly well, and I think they're an extraordinary movement. And I would argue that it was the uniqueness of a very small group of people working in a very specific location, Mexico City, that they made that possible. Because if you think about a movie like Babel, it throws out every convention that Hollywood has. When you come to Hollywood, they tell you movies are a 3-act structure. Act 1, boy meets girl. Act 2, put boy and girl up the tree. Act 3, get boy and girl out of the tree. And, Inarritu said, screw that. I'm going to start in the middle, go back to the beginning, then I'll go back to the kind of middle, and then I'll go to the end, and then I'll come back to the middle. I'm not going to go with that traditional narrative structure. So Jacques Barzun has this notion that great creative moments come when a few artists are in proximity, physical proximity, not internet proximity, but physical proximity to themselves, and they push each other to go higher. And that's exactly what happened, because I know these guys all worked together, they all worked on each other's screenplays, they all critiqued each other's movies. I happen to be lucky enough to be in one of those times with Marty Scorsese and Francis Coppola and George Lucas. And so I think that's important. Second, Tiffany, I am not against the internet.
Well, I think you just said that not bouncing off creative ideas over the internet, I'll wait my turn, but we'll.
Okay.
No, this is your turn.
Okay,
please.
Okay.
No, but let me just finish.
Let Tiffany respond.
I didn't get to say what I was saying.
But let me just respond to that one thing you said, because Matt Ridley wrote this great book called The Rational Optimist, and what he looked at throughout civilization, that innovation normally happened in cities because you had the most different perspectives bumping up against each other physically, and that's where innovation, creativity, and new ideas came out. Well, the internet is clearly providing this intersection of ideas and creative thinking, and there is absolutely no way that someone could say, it's like having an idea collider on your computer through Twitter. I get so inspired through things, links I would have never seen on Twitter, images on Pinterest. I'm constantly inspired in ways I never would be if I didn't have technology.
I totally agree. I teach a course called The Digital Revolution, Entertainment and Art. So I completely believe it. But first off, one utopian view was, why do we need cities anymore if we've got the internet? Everyone can
saying
go off and work in Boulder, Colorado, and everything. But in fact, more and more people are coming to cities because cities, people want to be engaged with other people. That's
Yeah,
why
one
people
does not
still
exclude
go
the
to
other.
college instead of just taking courses on the
I totally
University
agree.
of Phoenix. Okay, so the third thing is, I come from a place, the music I grew up with was the folk music movement in 1962, 63, 64, in which the notion that social justice and music was so intertwined that you couldn't separate the two. Now, why isn't that happening today? What is wrong with the music business today? I would argue that partially, there's a wonderful book now called The Power of Habit. And his argument is that we're all into habits. And one of those habits is checking my email every 2 minutes, checking my Facebook status every 4 minutes, checking, in other words, and what happens, he's proven, what happens when you do that is your brain goes to sleep. You are not engaged. It's why I make students turn off their computers when we're in the classroom. So look, I just don't want this techno-utopianism
Listen,
to
if you
be
saw
the end of the earth.
Wait a second. If you saw Connected, you would know that I go into both the good and the bad. And I have a new film coming out called Brain Power, where I look at new brain research, which looks at basically what technology is doing to our brain, and it's not all utopian. I'm actually very interested in the good, the bad, and the potential, but I think to discount as if the Three Amigos only happened because they were in proximity, and that Three Amigos couldn't happen through technology with 3 different cultures, that's the only part I'm taking to task. I love cities. I'm not saying one replaces the other, but I just don't want to have a conversation about creativity and artists that discounts the value of all of these creative ideas intersecting through technology.
I think though there is something interesting that emerges, and I was very struck, Jonathan, by your articulation of aspects of the environment that frustrate how we understand an artist can survive,
Right.
and how they can earn a living through their art. At the same time, and we've seen this destabilization. We've seen the destabilization of the publishing industry, of the music industry, across the board. And indeed, having in our work at CalArts, we have a relationship with Michael Eisner, who has a new company called Vugaru, which is dealing with web-based content. And I had the eerie feeling when at a meeting at Vugaru, because we were looking for a relationship to CalArts, I had the eerie feeling that this heavily capitalized entity wasn't exactly sure how to make money on the web, wasn't exactly sure what to do, and that actually some of the students that I have at CalArts knew how to do it better, much better.
Right.
So that this hierarchical structure was truly destabilized, where my students actually could navigate that universe much better. And despite those obvious destabilizations happening, I'm also entirely sympathetic to the perspective that Tiffany raised, which is that these alternative pathways of accessing not only information, but also potential sources of funding was also present. Did you want to say?
Well, I mean, I run a film studio in San Francisco. We have full-time staff, and we sell all.
I have a script, Tiffany. No.
But we do very well. We make documentaries too, and we sell the films ourselves to universities, corporations, show them, organizations, schools, theaters. They all pay us. There's no middleman. I own the rights to all my films, and I never could have done. I had a short film that became the #1 film on iTunes. Did very well financially. I never could have had those opportunities. So I guess I'm just saying we're an alternative film studio. We're not in Hollywood. I know it's a very ingrained structure here, but there are different ways to do things that just don't look like the old way. But to me, it's like the world is a possibility right now. Not enough filmmakers are using these new tools to experiment and figure out how to do that, which is unfortunate.
Just
Can
wait
I
till
say
your
something?
films get popular enough that you find them on the BitTorrent sites.
My film Connected, I'm scared to say this here, I believe that it's led to more purchases. And I've done little tests. So my film Connected, we gave away for free for this period with Tribeca, and DVD sales went way up. It was taken down, and DVD sales went down. So I hear you, and the Hollywood structure, the money is so much bigger. But that's a question, too. Why are the stars paid $1 gajillion? I mean, the money structure is so different. But I mean, I'm just saying that I hear you on the BitTorrent thing, and I go back and forth, but the truth is I'm still able to pay my team. Everyone's got health benefits. We have vacation, so it's not, and our sales are good. So there's a question about that. But I think the Hollywood budgets are so huge. They're so crazy huge that maybe that's one of the problems.
I think I would like to, first of all, I do want to say that one of the things that has been extraordinary, and I do want to kind of go back to an observation that Jonathan made about the vision of an artist, and where singular vision matters. Now, there are a couple of things that I'd just like to address in that. One of the things that I become progressively aware of is how the context of reception for that vision, the context for the artist, is crucial. It's arguable that when Dylan emerged, that he voiced the hopes, the dreams, and certainly the anxieties and of perhaps millions of disenfranchised young people, and a voice of dissent in terms of the Vietnam War, and that the context was present to receive that voice, and that in a sense it's very difficult. Vision can't be separated from the environment in which it is somehow.
Don't you think there are millions of disenfranchised young people right now?
I think that I would actually suggest that one of the questions that was raised by Ben earlier about the number of people here is that actually a certain intensity of crisis, if not catastrophe, focuses, and that with respect to interdependence, that actually certain and the obvious problem here is that perhaps it takes almost hopeless catastrophe to galvanize attention in a certain way. So I do think there are a multiplicity of disenfranchised people. However, what in the context focuses that? And I believe that actually we could find an entirely different environment for interdependence given certain sociological factors. That's all.
So I would just argue that they're too busy watching Kim Kardashian. I mean, really, quite frankly, they've got too much to do. There's too much entertainment coming into their lives. They don't have time to think about interdependence. They don't have time to even think about that politics might be a solution to their problems. There was Josh Silver wrote yesterday that if everybody who was registered to vote, everyone who was registered to vote voted, Obama had a 91% chance of winning the election. But the probability of that happening is almost zero. Because people are asleep. Because it's the Aldous Huxley vision. It's a brave new world. We're too zoned out by entertainment to know what the fuck is going on. I'm sorry.
Can I interject here, because I think this is a perfect example of an interdependent moment. We have to recognize that interdependence and interdependent thinking and the whole concept was born in dialectic. And dialectic means that you're holding two sort of contrary thoughts in your mind at the same time. And Travis, you talk about context. The context for this thought is one thing. The context for this thought is something else. If I try to find a solution for this thought, the impact on this will be very different from the impact on that. And I don't really have a resolution here, but I'm just identifying right now how we are constantly in our daily lives, in these kinds of issues, when we're talking politics, the essence of interdependence is there on the front burner all the time, and it is precisely, I don't have the answer, I don't know exactly what interdependent thinking as a tool to resolve this is, but I know that if we keep in the forefront of our mind some idea of holding those two things together as we speak to each other and as we try to come to solutions, we will find through interdependence some sort of a resolution that is better than the alternative for either side.
You know, I think the one...
They're pointing at us.
The one thing I was going to say that gives me hope, if I can just... Well, because when I was growing up, they said TV was going to turn my brain to mush, and I watched a lot of TV. My parents are divorced. I'd come home from school and watch hours of bad TV, and my brain didn't turn to mush. But and Socrates was worried that the written word was going to make us lose our memory, and it didn't. So it's always good to have some, to think back. But I'd say that the part
Socrates was right. I mean,
but we gained a lot. We gained a lot more with books than we did lose some of our memory. But we got to remember things more clearly. Anyways, but the thing I was going to say is if I can add a little bit of optimism here, the collaborative tools and the internet are literally, they're extensions of our brain, and they are showing how we can collaborate, and we're just at the beginning of these collaborative tools, not just in creating art, but in creating ideas and manifestos and written words together. So collaborative tools, I think, show interdependence in a very
I want to say, first of all, thank you. I'm so happy that we had a spirited dialogue here. And I on one last thing, we've made a lot of reference to technology here. On my computer, you saw when you got your computer and you went through all of those things. I think it can't be left unsaid that there are multiplicity of people throughout the world who do not have access to those technologies, yes, and that we need to promulgate that access in order for there to be a truly just society.
Amen.
Thank you.
Let me thank this panel and thank John particularly.